All right, perfect. So welcome everyone to today's session on how to succeed selling in New York City. Today, I have my guest, Trent Moffat, who is with Gotham Brands and Trax Retail. Trent, I'd love for you to just give a quick introduction to yourself and your experience.
Sure. My name is Trent Moffat. I'm the founder of Gotham Brand Managers. Recently acquired by Trax Retail Group last year. We founded this about 12 years ago with a couple of very cool brands and some brands that have made it and had not. But really, the foundation was I started as a broker, struggled as a broker, and the reason I even wanted to become a broker is I would work with startup brands over and over again, and two conclusions happen with a startup brand, right? Either they lose funding or they don't get the momentum going in time to continue to move on, or they do great and the team moves on. So either way, you're breaking up a team and then you're revamping a team on your next brand. So I wanted to find a way that I could have multiple brands under my umbrella and figure out a way. And probably the easiest way was to become a broker. But what I found is without a couple anchor brands to go into buyers with, just coming in with a new brand that they've never heard of is pretty difficult. So if anybody doing a startup now knows that, if you're just going in with one brand to see a buyer and build a relationship, it's very difficult. So what I did find from being a broker, though, was instrumental. The buyers typically only see a number. They don't leave the office. They're too busy. They're on the computer. They're hearing some information from their management team. This brand sells, this one doesn't. But they have no idea what possibly goes on in their stores. Visiting the stores, quickly find, and we've done that with brands going all the way back this far. The store employees that work the store didn't get the email to order the product. If it was a distro, meaning the product was distributed to all the stores, went in the store, they, sometimes it's at the back room, other times it was placed in the wrong segment of the store. And God forbid it sells well, right? They didn't know to reorder it because they see so many items in there. They could have 60,000 SKUs, right? So how are you able to determine that you're out of two of the best flavors of yogurt that, you might've brought in 4 flavors of yogurt. And I'm sure people have seen this in the stores, and we found it doing a lot of resets. If there's 4 or 5 flavors selling and 2 are left on the shelf, the employees overnight will take it and just slide it over. So now it looks like the shelf is full. Buyer walks by, assumes it's full, doesn't know that your top 3 sales just went out the door, and they're not going to get reordered because the 2 that are left on the shelf. Consumer goes to the next item, right? It goes to your competitor to find those flavors that they were looking for. And we found that by separating it, dividing it over, asking for the reorders, just by asking and mentioning the brand, a lot of times you get a lot of activity that way. Oh yeah, we did bring it in. Who's your distributor? You remind them a lot of stuff. When's the promotion coming up? So that evolved over time to the point where we put a lot of people on the street, just drained my 401k, just started hiring people. And from that point forward, we were able to build some brands. I mean, we got very lucky in the beginning. We had Runa, one of the original natural energy drinks that came out, and with a really cool bunch of guys. We had LaCroix, who came to us in New York, who had finished the rest of the country and left New York for last. Worked with a gentleman from Pirates Booty who came out with a drink that didn't do so well, but we were 2 out of the 3 right out the gate that worked out really well. And we were able to build from that. Some key learnings in the beginning. The focus for us is to minimize the number of brands we work with so that we can focus. And also know our place. I think by focusing on key accounts and the best neighborhoods, we take a percentage of the accounts that are available. So in New York, for example, there's probably 20, 30, there's about 25,000 accounts viable for non-alcoholic snack and beverage brands, right? So we do about 500 to 600 of them, which is a small percentage on a total, but we're literally just focused on the top A accounts in the best neighborhoods. We'll cover Manhattan, Hampton, Brooklyn, Queens. So to really get that notoriety going for the brand, get the visibility, the traction, everything the brand needs to get going. But after a year, I don't want to put on more trucks. I don't want to become a distributor. I did that at Nestle for many years, 120 trucks nationally, and it's a lot. So if we focus and just build the brand and push it off to another distributor that works well for us, and then with Trax and us, we have a tremendous merchandising team across the country that can cover any channel, any store. and build on it. So we could be in Whole Foods every day, or we could build a target program to see all the targets in a 3-month program to make sure that the end caps are up, or build a shipper display, whatever it might be, once the brands are built. But the focus has always been building the brands first. With
I love
Tracks,
that experience, and I love that you've been able to really be on the ground and help build these brands. So what I'd love to do today, kind of two-part. I have a couple questions for you to really kind of think about why New York City is a different market than a lot of others around the country. And I'd love to also take questions from our audience as well on specific challenges that they've dealt with. So for everyone listening in, we have a bunch of brands here. If you have questions that you've been dealing with or questions around launching in New York City, please ask those in the chat, and then I'll invite you to come up on screen to ask those to Trent directly. So Trent, I'd love for you to start too, talking about, I know you kind of talked about kind of building the accounts on the ground, starting with a kind of focus of about 500-600 yourself, but 25,000 potential accounts there in New York City. Why is New York City different from other markets, and what makes it unique?
sure. We have this now with Tracks, we have this DSE capability in multiple cities, Boston, LA, et cetera, that we can build. But what we find in New York is it's a unicorn of independent accounts, right? It's still, you go up and down the street on 3rd Avenue and there's independents either open or been around for 20, 30 years, right? So, and these are the folks, and what I mean by independents is it's where the buyer can make that decision right there at the store level. So if we go in with a new brand, somebody's there that can make the decision to bring it in, and then it could be brought in the next day. So our trucks will bring it in the next day. It's also very aggressive because everybody knows that, right? So if we miss that opening where there's an empty space on the shelf and we're in, if we're not delivering the next day, the guy behind us is going to get that order and fill the shelf, and we're going to get a refused order the next day. So it becomes it's very aggressive, but the potential is there to build a brand, because let's say, for example, you do 3rd Avenue, a couple stores on 3rd Avenue, and the brand really didn't take off. You revamp it a little bit. Now you can do Lexington, you can do First, you can go downtown, work with some other accounts, really figure out your product, and then bring it back to those accounts, and they'll bring it back in, right? Whereas opposed to you bring it right into Kroger, you have a launch, didn't do well, very hard to go back to the buyer. So you really get a chance to figure out your brand, build a story around it, get some velocities, get some volume, get some account base to bring to those buyers and say, hey, this is doing very well. Here's information I could share with you.
When you're going up and down the street and thinking about that, what's the best way that those independent buyers want to be approached? Are they looking to work with DSD distributors, or looking to work with brand founders directly? I know they're busy, they're running their businesses.
Sure.
How do you get their attention, and how do you suggest brands kind of even get started?
You are going to run into some accounts that are, I've done it on my car, I've done it on my trucks in the beginning. I built the route. So you are going to have some buyers that strictly just want to deal with a handful of distributors for a billing, and for, reception and computer issues that they might have. So it takes a little longer for certain accounts to crack that code. You have a brand that they want, you keep hitting them up, but there's enough retail accounts that you could just skip him and go to the next one. So I always say, when you go into account, look for the space where you want to be, look for the competition, where you think your place and your pricing, have everything ready to go, have samples. And in certain accounts, if it's a bagel store, you don't want to be there during breakfast. Probably want to hit them up, right before lunch. Same thing with some of the bodegas, quote unquote, or the large delis. Same thing, you want to hit them before or after lunch. And then that's the time that you can hit some of your larger markets, right? Your larger independent markets that don't have a busy lunch crowd, but you can go talk to the buyer then. Early starts here are key. Typically 6, 7 a.m. You start to see, some of your folks in stores, and you can work your routes around that. You're not going to typically find a buyer that can make that decision after 3 o'clock. So you got to be done by 2, 3 o'clock after that lunch blitz. And then if you're working with distributors to get those orders in, they probably have a shut off time somewhere between 1 and 4 o'clock too, because then they just got to start loading their trucks for the next day. So those are just some of the things to be aware of.
How do you make your product appealing to those buyers? Is it offering a free fill? Is it offering kind of product on consignment? Are they going to buy it from you straight up? Like for new products, right, that people haven't really heard of, how do you kind of make that impression where they're like, all right, we'll give you a shot?
So the one thing about the independents, they like to hear the word free a lot, whether they're buying a brand that they bought for 5 years, or they've, and done well with, or you know, it's a brand new item, right? They like to hear that word free. The pricing, and so you have to almost incorporate your pricing around that. I've got brands that lift the price, knowing that they're going to have to offer a 5-and-1 ongoing, or 10-and-1 ongoing, or 10-and-3, something ongoing to entice them to buy. But you're right. One of the things we're pretty successful here, working with the warehouse, is we don't want to give just free product away, just a free fill across the board, right? Because if an owner brings it in and he pays for it, now he takes ownership of it, gives you a better shelf placement. We'll work with you, make sure the pricing's accurate, as opposed to letting it sit in the back. You just didn't pay anything for it. Puts it out there at any price, doesn't care. Then it doesn't sell, puts it out for 99 cents and just killed your item. So if they buy it, they're gonna take a little bit more ownership on it. What I will tell my brands is you don't want to give away just one case, one flavor, and just put one SKU on the shelf. You're going to get lost really quickly. So what we try and do up front is just do a BOGO. We'll mix cases if we have to make sure all the SKUs are represented at the warehouse level. This way we get the space, we get the product up, and then when you go back for the reorder, you've already got all the SKUs in it, and you can build from there. It's a little easier.
And then in terms of products, I know there's every different type of independent, but are there types of products that you see being asked for in the market? Are there certain stores that are looking to bring in like well-known products, or other stores that are more open to new, kind of never heard of before products? Kind of what does that landscape look like right now?
Our accounts like to find things that are new, right? So they know that we deal with a select number of accounts, so we don't go to their neighbor across the street that they might compete with to bring it to them first. So they're like first to market with whatever brand it might be. We're first to market with the CBD drinks. We're the first to market with the plant-based drinks with Owen and Rebel. So I think we're always ahead of the curve on certain brands, because they'll come to us, and a lot of the big distributors are, you know, rightfully so, don't know if it's going to work or not, and to bring in, you know, for them to bring in a tractor trailer and open up their sales team to it, and on an unknown item becomes difficult. They'll let us build it first, let us get all the kinks out and work it out to make sure it works, and we pass them off to a lot of big distributors here. So our retailer typically, they like to look for new items, no question.
Okay, awesome. And then we got a question that came in from Sarah Cirilla. She asked, she's doing a summer partnership with Pop-Up Grocer in the city, and is wondering how to best leverage that relationship to launch in other accounts. Is it something that like other accounts kind of know about, and they're kind of looking at trendy things there? Can you bring that up?
Some accounts do know what Pop-Up Grocer is, others won't. So you know, you could just say we're in a couple of accounts, 6 accounts. Here's the volume we're doing. So have your homework and have your piece of paper ready. Here's what we did per week, per month. You know, we're selling X number of cases, and these are our top SKUs. You'll have a lot of that information. Plus, through the Pop-Up Grocer, which is pretty cool, you'll know your price point. So when they say you won't sell at this price, you've already got some history of doing so. I don't think from what I've seen, anybody gets upset that you're working with Pop-Up Grocer, even across the street, because they know it's short term and they're trying the product. You're really you're highlighting your product to show that it does sell, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, kind of the sense of wanting to be a lot of independents want to be the only store kind of selling a product in the area. Does that tend to be I've been in New York a number of times, but does that tend to be like on a street level? Like, I don't want anyone to cross the street on the block. Or is it like in the like a 2-3 block radius, kind of what's kind of like outside their territory?
I think it goes all the way up, you know, from a Whole Foods, right? Wanting to have an exclusivity for 3 to 6 months, down to the, you know, the independent with his neighbor across the street. So it goes across the board with everybody. Everybody wants to be first, but nobody wants to be first. They all want to show that it sells and it does well. We've done well because we've brought in so many new items to these folks that they know if a flavor doesn't work, something expires, something does, you know, if let's say a package change happens because we realize that, you know, something has to be redone, we swap out all the products at the street level. We're a hand touch item. For our products, our guys are out there, our trucks are out there, and so if something doesn't work, we're going to swap it out, and that alleviates a lot of the pressure off of them, because a lot of them are taking a risk, right? If they take 10 cases, and you know, one, they're losing shelf space, which costs them a lot of money on rent in the city, is very expensive, and 2, they are, you know, outlaying cash in many instances on a product they don't know.
As you're kind of working with different products, I know you're taking a limited assortment. Do you have any recommendations for other independent distributors who are good fits for early brands?
I've worked with them all. I've worked with from the smallest Korean distributor all the way up to, you know, Geyser, and working with brands to figure out when it's selling and how it's doing to pass them off to the right distributor. What I always say, and when we're at a point, 6-7 months into a brand, it's doing well, we'll send out notes to the distributors. I could push through with a lot of relationships to ask for favors, to get meetings and hopefully bring the brands in. But at the same time, if the distributor's not excited or they're over capacity on a certain segment, don't push it. There's enough distributors here to figure that out. And when somebody's excited, that makes it a lot easier, right? You can imagine a sales manager that just did you a favor, brought it in, and he's not a full believer in it. And the sales team's inevitably going to come back and say it doesn't sell, because for new products are very tough to get moving and it takes time, right? You got to be on the shelf for 3 months, 6 months. And, maybe in these 2 stores, it didn't work, but this one, it did work. And you want to focus on that direction. But when the sales team comes back to the sales manager and says it didn't work, he's going to be, I knew it wouldn't sell, and he's going to kind of just brush it off. Versus if he's excited for it, he's going to push back on the sales team to say, did you try here? Did you try there? What's your price point? He's going to start asking questions. And I find that's a big difference. You want people excited for your product.
Yeah, that makes a good point. Speaking about that, Molly had a question on marketing. Molly, are you available to come on and ask your question directly?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Molly.
Hi. So you mentioned about a lot of independents. I also work with a lot of independents here in Chicago. One of the challenges I find is creating a cohesive marketing plan that allows me to execute more easily, because a lot of them have their own things that they want to do or that they're open to having me do. And so I didn't know if you have any suggestions on how to perhaps pitch or get them on board with something that can be where I'm not doing 50 different things.
Yeah.
50 different
All right.
places.
I mean, that's a good news, bad news, right? Because the independents will work with you on a bunch of different things. You could be in the cooler on this one, or maybe a promo cooler on another one. The other one puts you up front on display. So that's actually a good thing in many instances, because a lot of them might have a trade publication or something else that they like to do, or maybe they charge you for an end cap. But it's hard to create something, to your point, cohesive. Where I have seen brands being successful recently is working with some kind of geotag, whether it be through Facebook or another one of the Instagram or something else on that level, because we supply our vendors weekly with a street level address of everything that's been delivered. So they know what accounts, what areas, and it's been pretty effective, and it's pretty cost effective also to, if you're in 30 accounts, for example, in Chicago, here are the zip codes, and here's where we can start to target. And here's my type of brand, by the way, because they can be very specific towards your consumer in those instances, and it's pretty cost effective.
Thank you.
Along with that, have you found, unlike maybe some of the larger stores, we could do sampling tables and things. Do the independents allow sampling, or is that a thing there?
That's a great question. So pre-COVID, we had a tremendous sampling team here that we just brought back on, but 6 months, a year ago. That was probably the only thing we had to shut down, and it's really getting back up to speed, but nothing like putting a product in somebody's hands. And we do it in the smallest store with small tables, sometimes outside during the summer. But yeah, we do like the sampling activity in the store. It's just another sales tool, because now we can sell multiple units off the cooler. We track what our folks do when they are sampling, how many did they sell. In our salespeople, it's a full circle, right? So now the sampling manager lets the sales rep know that there's sampling coming up this week. So if you're out of 2 flavors, make sure you get them in. And then the sampling occurred and you're out of stock on 3 flavors. So now you got just 2 reorders just on the sampling alone. Plus somebody's in the store. And to your point earlier about talking to a buyer, they're always busy. But if you're sampling in a store and you've got a good person there working with you, for you, that buyer's going to get bored and he's going to come stand to you and talk to you about your product for 10 minutes and probably everything else. And not they're going to have some time. And then that's the time that they learn about your product. Why is it selling? Who's their consumer? And it's not just the product you're selling, but it's also the impact you're having on the employees while you're there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, where a lot of founders, maybe outside of New York, think like, oh, let me open up this chain. We'll launch in 100 stores or so, and I can be fairly hands off. It sounds like New York is very much about the ground game, being in every single, all the store level, having someone represent you there, getting to know the buyers, knowing the distributors you're working with well, so that you can make sure that you not only get on the shelf there, but stay there. Yeah,
and we sample anywhere from from our independents that we open up on the DSD side to now working with Trax. We can sample in, to your point, 100 store chain to a 7,000 store chain and make that work just to get the product in people's hands and hopefully out the door. So
Awesome. Dr. Juan, I see you had a question on coupons. Do you want to come on and ask?
Yes, hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hey.
Hey, how's it going? No, I'm just curious about the effectiveness of coupons, man. I've heard different opinions on packaged coupons.
So
New
for us,
York.
for us, for the independents, I mean, most of them won't use them, right? I've got a handful of stores that do. We'll set them up in the system and or set up for, for clearing them out, but most of the independents are not. Typically, we'll just negotiate, if we give you an extra free case, if we discount the price on the case, for the next 2 weeks, can you put it on sale or do a 2 for $5 or something like that, and we'll create signs, or they'll create signs, and we could do something like that. Coupons on a scale, typically, I encourage it, especially if you're getting into a larger chain and you want to be able to promote and make sure that it works. They do work, especially if you're attaching IRCs or something like that. We do those all the time. So.
No, that's great. One thing I have been seeing a lot come up are brands using digital rebate programs where essentially they can, run an ad on social media or something in New York and say, hey, shop at these locations, here are a full store list, buy the product, text the receipt, and then we'll refund you or rebate you a certain amount.
So we are just doing some of that stuff with QR codes. We're attaching QR codes instead of a coupon that goes right to the website, so they get a discount that way. And it's it's hit or miss. The IRCs, the coupons, whatever you hand out, for a 4% redemption, a little higher, obviously, when it's attached to the product. If it's a neck hanger and a bottle, for example, you're going to get a higher redemption. So you got to look at the cost of that too. It's not like every single item is going to be 50 cents off or $1 off or $1.50. So
yeah, that totally makes sense. Deepika had a question on, I think, understanding she should launch in the New York market. Deepika, do you want to come on to ask your question?
Yes. So we're seeing some success in food service. I run a sustainable bottled water company. Wondering, as we get into thinking about New York, any advice you have on working with food service distributors or just food service space in general?
Like any distributor, right? So the reason we start and we've limit the brands is so that we can actually accelerate into, these accounts and get the brands moving before they go into a large distributor system and get lost. Food service can be just as daunting, if you're looking at a Baldor's all the way down to a Cisco, huge, right? And to get in, set in the system. Typically, we do some food service here as well for brands that have started to excel past 3 to 6 months. Then we'll start to open them up to our food service division and work with them that way. What you want is an anchor, right? So you're looking, you'd want to open up if you're already in food service in another city. Do they have other accounts here in New York that you can open up quickly? Because obviously that becomes an anchor for them to start delivering, and then you could build on that. And like anything, if you ask them what their top 10 accounts are, who should you make connections with to build once you're in, that's another good way to work with your distributors. Ask them where they want you to go. No sense in you opening up a food distributor account that's not there that they don't deliver to, that somebody else does, because now the chances of them getting set up is not going to happen, right? So if you're going to Chase Bank, and working through their food service, or you're working through, Google here, you want to be set up. You want to work with a distributor that's linked to that, and you also want to ask your distributors where to go. They'll help you.
Yeah. Any small distributors? Any place we can access a list of distributors we could work with in New York?
So we work with them all. We don't really publish any kind of list, but yeah, we've got them and we work with them. But there certainly are. If you're looking in New York, for example, and you've got a specific type of item, I would go in some stores and say, who's a great distributor for this item, whether it be toothpaste all the way to, salsa or a water, who delivers a lot of water to you, who delivers your salsa, or eggs.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Grant, I'm curious, are there any, or who are the influential kind of grocers or retailers that people are looking to in terms of seeing like what the next products coming in are?
So we've seen, for obviously Whole Foods is huge on that. Fairway's still big on that. Gourmet Garage. You still have your larger, Union Square. You've got some key, quote unquote chains in the city. And then on the independent side, you still West Side Markets are, cover the city. Westerly has been an anchor account forever. Health and Harmony downtown. Sunax, Brooklyn Harvest. We've got City Acres has done a really good job. Food Story here in Queens. There are certain neighborhoods where they're almost like a travel store where people go and, you know, they're a destination store. And we've seen that over and over again. And other ones are just neighborhood stores, so.
Yeah, I know we've seen the rise of like, you know, the Erewhons in Los Angeles area just being one of those influencers and stuff. Always curious to know who some of those are.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I've been loving all the questions coming in. Anyone else have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat here, and then we can make sure they get those answered. Thinking about supporting those stores over time, right? Let's say you get the product in, you kind of get that first order. What are some of the other things that you can do to like regularly check in with the stores and make sure that you're continuing to build that relationship in a way that's changing kind of throughout the year?
So I think a lot of focus we get is when we're doing route rides. So either the owner comes in or he's got a sales rep in the area that works with our team. You get a lot of feedback back and forth. One, back to the brand that these SKUs are doing well here, these SKUs are not doing well here, these price points are a little high here, you know, so you get some direct, sometimes when you see it versus hearing it from a note or a report or hearing it from me on a call, actually seeing it and hearing it from a buyer makes a big difference. Plus, you're not just focused here, you're focused here. Now you're looking at what competition A, B, and C are doing versus your product. And that can make a big difference, right? Or maybe something totally out of your thought process might be, you know, look, these guys are all doing shippers here. Maybe I need a shipper now because I'm starting to do some volume and I didn't even notice that. So hearing it and seeing it are two different things. I think being in the field certainly helps. And buyers appreciate a founder coming in, asking questions. How can I help? What do you see here? Obviously some are busy and they're just going to throw you out, but you know, overall 80% of them will work with you depending on the time of the day and what you do. So
I know you see a lot of what goes wrong as well, Trent. So what are some of the top mistakes that you see brands making when they're trying to start here?
The biggest mistake I see for any new brand starting is they overproduce, right? Because it's the point of sale math, it's the co-packer math. Creating a 12-pack of 100,000 units is almost the same as creating it for 10 to 20,000. You know, it's the same math, right? But people don't take into account, they got to pay for the labels, the caps. If it doesn't work, now you're paying to throw product away or donate it if you can, and you want to make a change. So you're trying to sell through a tremendous amount of product. And until it's on the shelf, it looks great in the hand and when somebody brings in samples or on a sell sheet. But until it's produced and it's on the shelf, you really don't know what it's going to look like and what works and what doesn't without a couple of weeks go by and relate to the consumer. And then maybe you want to make a change on a mistake or a flavor. Maybe these flavors are selling better than those. You want to be able to pivot pretty quickly. And if you produce too much, it becomes difficult.
No, that's good. What's the time frame do you think it takes to really be successful in selling in New York? Is it something that you can kind of kick off a launch in the summer and kind of let things snowball from there? Do you see it takes 2-3 years to really build up momentum? I mean, I know it's all about time.
No, that's a great question. For us, it's we have 1-year contracts that we do with our brands, and then we go from month to month. If you know they're not set up with the distributor, they're making a change, or we're just working through some things. But for us to go month to month in the back end is certainly a lot easier than starting at the first 3 months. But we found over time, it takes about a year on shelf. Somewhere between months 4 and months 8 is where you'll start to see if the reorders are really starting to click. We're pretty good at setting up somewhere between 25 to 100 accounts per month, depending upon the type of brand that it is. And then as you start to build that and it's got some time on the shelf, then you start to see the reorders or not, right? Sometimes you don't see the reorders coming at the rate you want, and then you've got some issues you got to work through. But on average, just about a year is what we require here because we know it takes some time to develop and build.
Perfect. Dr. Wan had another question. Do you want to come up and ask yours?
Yeah, opinion on in the city, Korean district.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, the city, Korean distributors, work doing.
He's cutting out a little bit. And in chat, he mentioned his opinion, what's your opinion on working with, he mentioned, I guess he's considering working with a Korean distributor in the city that sells to Korean stores, or maybe even just thinking about distributors who sell to certain types of stores throughout the city.
We work with a lot of them and they're very good because they've got great relationships in the store. What you got to realize though, is they've got everything in that store, right? From the salad dressing to the gum, to the kind bar, to the beverages. paper towel. They've got everything inside that store, right? So their catalog is vast and big. So if you're a brand new item, to think that you're going to be called out every time a sales rep goes in from that distributor, oh, and by the way, we have a new product. You might be able to do a promotion, you know, a BOGO up front, or, you know, maybe an incentive for their sales reps, but beyond the first 2 to 4 weeks, the brand's going to have legs and stand on its own. So they're very good. I like to leave them for once the brand is built and we're getting inquiries and the reorders. We're doing, you almost, it's a hard one, and you're not going to get in front of their sales team. You're not going to be able to meet with them regularly. They're just too busy and they've got too many brands. So their sales meeting is absolutely packed with a list of brands and what's new. They could be bringing in 10 to 15 brands a week, right? So you're going to get lost pretty quickly if you don't have something that's a known item or known category, right?
I mean, it kind of sounds, as well as you mentioned, do you see brands working with typically like one distributor to cover the city, or are they working with 3, 4, 5 to hit everything?
I've seen both on the natural distributors, you know, and some of the bigger, larger distributors, Manhattan, et cetera. They'll have one contract to say they can, you know, to cover everything. In, you know, a Korean, a food service, another independent distributor. So I've seen both, and I've seen both work successfully. On one side, you can get to a lot of nooks and crannies. It depends on your brand too, right? If you've got a traditional beverage water brand, you probably want to go with an exclusive distributor just to tackle it. And they're going to go to the known quantity of retailers. Whereas you might have a snacking cookie where you want to go into the Hudson News, and you want to go into the news shops. You want to go to some of the smaller delis and larger delis. So it depends upon your product really, but the more distributors you have, obviously the more work. And if you're national and you've got 12 distributors in New York, that becomes a lot to manage too. So
Howard had a question. Howard, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Trent.
Hey, Al.
By the way, I have worked with one of those Korean distributors outside of Secaucus, and they wanted buy one pallet, get one free, and they wanted spiff for all their reps. And it got very unmanageable, and but that was just one line.
So
But
it's very similar across the board.
yeah. So who knows if the reps even are, or the owners are honest about the spiffs and all that stuff. So not many manufacturers doing spiffs directly to distributors anymore, I don't think. But anyway, I'm a small independent broker in the Mid-Atlantic, mostly do the Mid-Atlantic states into the Carolinas, and then I have one national product that I'm selling all over the country. Many retailers are buying from Fair. And we have a hard time when the retailer goes directly to Fair, and if you have sold that product to the retailer before, they're supposed to tell Fair that I was buying it from XYZ company, and so we get some credit, and many retailers don't do that. So how does the broker, but also how do we get the independents to buy from the distributor or directly from the manufacturer?
From us, if it's just feet on the street, right? We're talking to the buyers in the stores directly to get those orders, right? And that becomes obviously the larger it becomes, and the masses, if you're talking in for one of the other big independent groups, we found that running a promo does work because of, you're paying to be on the front of their sheet or the front of the website or something that might work. But typically we've got a team that can go into those accounts with the sell sheet, talk to the buyer, work through them, try and get the order on some kind of promo deal. And that works also. So for us, it's expensive, right? Because you're putting a head count in a store selling a product, but it's also an investment the way we look at it, because once that product starts to turn, then hopefully it sells well. And then, the brand has a life of its own. The buyer starts to take over those responsibilities. But up front, any brand you have, somebody's going to have to take ownership of it.
Yeah, but the store is buying it from a distributor, or they're buying it direct?
Depends. We've got stores that could take it 3 different ways. And for us, mostly, we just leave it up to them. Whether, we deliver ourselves. And if they want to take it from Unify or from one of the distributors here that we're starting to grow with, I'd rather push it off our trucks and give it to where they want to put it, and where they want to take it in from, because that's long-term growth. it's hard to fight a retailer if he says, I want to go with X, Y, and Z. I know you want to push sometimes in one direction, but if it's easier for them, it's going to help build your brand in that store.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howard. We had another question from Whites who asked, other than the Whole Foods, do you see New York retailers have restriction requirements on attributes like organic, free from, more or less than in other markets?
Of course, but it's a segment, right? So our health food markets, Health and Harmony, Westerly, Provision, some of the ones out in the Hamptons, they've got a very tight list of what they can and won't carry, right? So, but that's a segment, and then we've got other segments. If it's a stevia account or something else to flavor, sweeten with a different product, we've got delis that will take it as well. So to answer your question, yes, but it's a segment. How big the segment is, probably about 10 to 15% of our accounts.
Are there any unexpected types of accounts that brands should be looking at that aren't typical? But I know you mentioned like delis is one, but obviously it's big in New York. But if you're coming from another market, you might not think to like approach delis. Can they have their markets? Are there other types of accounts like that?
Yes and no. Every market's a little different in what they have, and it depends on your brand, right? So some brands want to be in every single yoga studio that we can come up with, and we'll come up with a list and we'll go out and target them with them to build. Others might be looking for maybe not something on that side, but maybe something on, a unique type of account. Like we've got Boulders here that does rock climbing. So very few SKUs in there, but you can get your product in there, and all of a sudden the whole neighborhood's kind of seen it because it's a destination for the neighborhood. Others have done on premise, others have done, I think gyms, for example, are a great way to get, a regular person going in every day seeing your product. It depends upon, literally depends on your product, because some of them won't fit in the gym, right? So.
Awesome. Cool. Well, as we're kind of wrapping up here, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. But Trent, any other kind of closing thoughts on what brands need to be doing, either specifically in New York or in general to be successful that we haven't covered yet?
My best advice is just go into the stores where you'd like to be sold, look at the shelf, look at the coolers, look at the space where you're supposed to be. And then you're going to get a lot of information from that, just watching that shelf space, who's buying the products that you're looking to sell similar items for. If you're not in the store, if you are in the store are they looking at your product? Are they not looking at your product? You'll get a lot of information just being in the store and talking to the employees. They're happy to share all the data that they see from this item, and this item, what packs out. And you'll even see when they bring out the U-boats, what are they packing out the most of? Is it from a flavor to a size to a channel? So
I guess that's another thing. Are there special displays that stores want to take in terms of like off-shelf displays?
So for us, we do a lot with shippers. I mean, cardboard used to be a lot cheaper. It's not so cheap anymore. I suppose the old, wood racks, whatever rack you're going to put in a store is going to get thrown out. So just put that up front. It might last a week, it might last 6 months, but eventually it's going to get tossed and they're going to ask for it. Where is it? And they're not going to know, and they're going to please them, but it's gone. But the cardboard for us, somewhere around 12 by 12 is ideal. We'll go as far as 18 by 12 or 18 by 18 if you have to, but just imagine the floor space is tight. So if you can lessen the argument for them to say that there's no space and show them there's space for this. And I would not do a program like that until the product starts to move, right? So if you take a regular beverage, for example, or a bar, you putting it the bar at the register or the beverage in the cooler, and give people time to figure out which flavors they like, what they're looking for. Get people to try it, get some momentum going, and then you can work into the shipper program. What you don't want to do is just walk in with a shipper day one, fill it with 20 cases, and then 18 cases are still there. That when you come back, 2 cases went great, but for him, the buyer, it's all in his head how fast things are going, and it's all based on just that reality, right? So maybe 2 cases a lot in the first 2 weeks if it was sold in the cooler, and you get a reorder. But if you put that on a shipper program with 20 cases, he's going to have a bad taste in his mouth. So just, you want to grow. You don't want to just jump in. Everybody wants to jump in with an end cap, but you got to build in there.
I've talked to some brands who are also kind of dabbling in certain account or certain cities and certain markets, but I've heard that in New York in particular, the recommendation is don't go into New York unless you're fully into making it successful, because it's very easy to get kicked out of stores. Do you think that's true?
Yes and no. I mean, so you got Midtown, we'll say for last, we kind of work the same system, right? So we work our way through. You know, you could have a guy paying $40,000 to $80,000 a month in rent. He's not selling enough Coke and Pepsi to pay that rent, you know, so he's got to have things that are just absolutely moving. And if something's sitting for 2 days, it might be your best account selling 40 cases in a week, but he's selling 200 cases of this and 400 cases of this. You just might not be ready to, you know, he's got to have product going through the register to pay that rent at the end of the month, and that, you know, his lease, and that becomes where it becomes difficult.
Perfect. Trent, thanks so much for joining today and for joining for this conversation. I think
Thank
it's
you.
been extremely
Enjoyed
helpful.
it. Thanks.
All right, thanks
Appreciate it.
everyone. As mentioned, I'll be sending out a recording after this as well in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. Have a great week.